Scanning your own film at home is a fantastic way to save money, and you might even like the results better than sending it to a lab. I've been using a digital camera and a tripod to scan my film ever since I started developing it myself. It gets the job done, but setting it up is a pain. What I really want is a copy stand, but I don't want to spend the money to buy one. So instead, I'm going to build my own. I've recruited my dad to help with this project. He's got all the tools we need to make this happen. For the base, we're using a beautiful piece of maple my dad had on hand. It's solid, heavy, and perfect for creating a sturdy copy stand. Not knowing how big to make the base, I went as wide as my dad's tools would allow, 12 inches. We started by trimming the natural edges down to size on the bandsaw. Since the blade was dull, it wasn't the smoothest process, but it got the job done. Once the sides were cut, I figured 20 inches was probably a good length. Then used the bandsaw again to get the final rough shape. Then used a joiner to flatten the edges. The joiner is a little intimidating, especially since we were dealing with some tear-out issues, so I let my dad handle the finishing passes. It doesn't need to be perfect, just functional. Next we ran both sides through a planer to get the top and bottom surfaces flat. To clean up the edges, we used a router to round them off. The bit we had was oversized, so we had to remove the base plate. This made the process trickier, but it worked for the most part. On the underside of the base, there were some cracks. To prevent further splitting, we filled them with superglue. After that, it was time to sand. We started with 80 grit sandpaper to remove all the tool marks and smooth the edges, then moved up to 150 grit for a smooth finish. I decided that was good enough and stopped there. Finally, I finished the wood with a protective wax that dries without leaving a greasy residue. For the upright part of the stand, I'm repurposing a leftover piece of black iron pipe. I really didn't like the look of the galvanized floor flange I already had, so I headed to the hardware store to find something better. Here's the iron pipe section at Home Depot. I'm using a 3/4 inch, 24 inch long pipe, but you can adjust the size depending on your setup. Just make sure the camera clamp will fit securely. I ended up choosing a black floor flange, which looks much better, and a matching cap for the top of the pipe. If you don't have access to a wood shop, you could use a piece of plywood instead. Most hardware stores can cut it down to size for you. While I was there, I grabbed some screws. I wasn't sure what size I'd need, so I got both number 10 and number 12 screws. I also noticed some stiff sprinkler pipe. It made me wonder if you could make an ultra budget version of this stand. It might work if your camera and lens are very lightweight. Back in the shop, I carefully centered the floor flange on the base and drilled pilot holes. I went as deep as the widest part of the screw threads, about 3/4 of an inch in my case. Despite my best efforts, one of the holes was slightly off center, but it's not a big deal. Next, I cleaned the old pipe I had lying around and applied the same protective wax to prevent rust. For the camera mount, I used a clamp from Small Rig that supports over 30 pounds. There are cheaper clamps out there, but I decided to invest in one that's stronger and more user-friendly. For an ultra-budget version, I suspect you could repurpose a stage lighting clamp like this, but height adjustments would be more difficult. I attached a ball head I no longer use from an old tripod, but you can easily find affordable ones online. And there you have it. Custom-built copy stand for a fraction of the price of buying a new one. It came out a lot better than I expected. And it works great. This setup is going to make my at-home film scanning so much easier. This ended up costing me about $45. However, I already had a pipe, piece of wood, and an old tripod head. In my area, the price would be about double to buy everything, assuming you go for a cheap Amazon tripod head and use plywood. If you decide to build one yourself, I'd love to hear about it in the comments. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like and subscribe. See you next time.